Said all of this, the other point I wanted to make is that I feel at times that the debate is all about what's all going to happen overnight. You know, we're going to have this potentially this infrastructure in place, and all of a sudden the world will change from dryland farming with part irrigated around some groundwater takes, surface water takes, to 25,000, 30,000 hectares. Well, that is not going to happen. It'll be a process over a period of years.
Mr. Chairman, if I can raise another point about communications while we're dealing with that, and again I'd like to ask through Mr. Newman to perhaps Helen. There was an opinion piece published in Hawke's Bay Today a little while ago by Eugenie Sage, the Green Party spokesperson on water. Now again, she holds a different view to a lot around this table, and I don't have any argument or dispute with that. But there, in my view, in that opinion piece published in Hawke's Bay Today, she deliberately misrepresented our position again by saying that the $80 million which we have earmarked for capital investment was to be raised by borrowing. Now, it was either clearly stated or inferred, and I know a number of councillors took that up, and I took it up with the newspaper, and they were good enough to allow me to publish a letter correcting that, and I know 2 other councillors also have taken it up. I want to ask Mr. Newman, again through his communications team, are you communicating directly with the likes of Eugenie Sage when there are, again, deliberate inferences and deliberate misinterpretations of the truth? Because I believe that we've got to serve our ratepayers in our community upfrontly and honestly, and not allow these sort of continual misrepresentations and continual lies to be portrayed out into the public.
Let him answer the question.
Look, the answer is we spend our time judiciously correcting facts in hopefully in a reasonably factual, unbiased, sensible way, really. And look, I think that ideally what we'll end up with here at the end of this journey sometime next year is at least from HBRC's perspective a view that will be communicated back to the regional council as to whether, in HBRC's view, it's a viable proposition on its financial viability, and ultimately it delivers the other benefits that the council itself wants strategically. That's the job. That's the job we need to stay focused on, I think. And I'm a believer that if it stacks up, it'll stack up on its own merits, actually. And there'll be hopefully sufficient information in the public domain to make that pretty clear.
Perhaps I'll get a view from our CE.
So yeah.
Sorry,
okay.
can I just
Yep.
thanks, Andrew,
Yep.
and just in response to that specific example that you did give, Councillor, in relation to the talking point piece from Ms. Sage. I also contacted the editor of Hawke's Bay Today, and he published a letter to the editor response from me in relation to some of the incorrect information that was included in there. And I felt that was there's 2 reasons for doing that rather than going to the author. One was it was going to be the quickest response, and secondly, it was going to reach the audience that hers had reached only the day before. So I felt that rather than go perhaps a circuitous route of trying to correct her, it was better to get the correct information directly out to the public again.
Just on a slightly different tack of us liaising with those that have an interest in this cause, or one way or the other, I just wonder to what extent are we liaising with the Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay, who obviously wants this, and his council wants this project to proceed, but I'd have to say I heard him twice on national radio, different interviews. He was at top of the hill on one case. I think he was chopping a thistle out or something, and I'd have to say he was unbriefed on it, and the second time round he would have had time to catch up on a few things. I thought he didn't do the cause that he stands for and we stand for rather any justice at all, and I just wonder, are you what's your liaison with the Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay that keeps him well up with the play?
Hell, that's a good one.
They're uncontrollable.
we sorry, leave councillors to form their own views on that issue, but we have as you'll be aware, we have briefed councillors and mayors on this project, and we'll continue to make that offer. And if there's material issues of that type, we'll do that, and that's really our main task. So is that I think that's how we need to do it. I don't think we can absolutely suggest to a given individual what they're going to say, how they're going to say it. We can hopefully keep them well informed, but I do note. No, that's probably enough actually.
I could answer that. He has been involved in the stakeholder briefings all the way through, the Mayor of Central Hawke's Bay. But in his defence yesterday, I did ring him not long after that interview, and he was trying to work a sheepdog at the same time. And any of you who have worked a sheepdog and tried to talk on the phone, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt.
Mr. Chairman, notwithstanding his virtuosity and not reflecting in the slightest on what he said on the radio per se, I went to the Hawkins briefing in Waipawa, and there was it was a big number of people there, and Peter was there, of course. Oh, sorry, Mayor Butler, and I actually agree with Councillor McGregor that I actually think Mayor Butler himself should be on the list every couple of weeks for a phone call or a meeting. It's critical that community both buys into it, and we know that, but owns it in the very wide sense. And my question really is about the socio-economic thing that Debbie Hewitt's apparently chairing. Could you just update us, because that was completely news to me, and I think it's a good idea, but where does all this fit?
That councillor fits in the... well, really, there's two lines into that MOU. It's a very simple MOU that's really essentially got that Debbie's been working on, which is designed to make sure there's a sort of coordinated institutional response to the value of the project should it proceed. I think I've always got a phrase that way: should it proceed. And that whether it's economic development, social development, it's labour force considerations, planning around those things, the district plans informed in CHB's case or even Hastings' case, that piece of work is designed to really ensure there's some integrated thinking and there's an alignment. I mean, it's reasonably straightforward in that sense. And the symbolism of it is a simple MOU. But equally, that MOU, and that's its main purpose, but that MOU is of use to an EPA assessment as well, because it just gives a line of sight into the broader part of the community engagement with it. So that's really where it's evolved from. That helps.
Following on from that question, who is on that socio-economic working party and how were they chosen, please?
I think Debbie Hewitt, per se, is simply doing a facilitation task for HBRC with various institutions, including EIT, including the district councils, Business Hawke's Bay, the Chamber of Commerce, Tamatea Taiwhenua. So it's simply a process that's around the obvious institutions in the community that serve their communities around a common cause. That's all it is.
Is it open to the public?
Well, it's not. There's no great secrets around what's in it. So
can anybody attend it?
I don't think there are a whole series of formal meetings per se. I think it's. I'd have to check out with Debbie as to exactly where it's at in that regard. But it's not It's not about putting all these institutions in the same room on a weekly basis and having chat. Though there may be some sort of coordinated planning action will emerge around it, which would be a good thing if it does. Yep.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, just in terms of communications, elections coming up, when nominations or after nominations close, I suggest it might be a good idea to offer candidates, all candidates, new and existing, or new and incumbent, a briefing along the lines of the one that you did for the councils.
Yep.
Because there are going to be quite a number of new faces around the various councils, and these are all people who will have a degree of interest in this project one way or another.
It's a good suggestion. Yep.
Any other questions? Councillor Scott.
The figure around the $600 million dam, Mr. Chairman, and obviously includes a lot of private investment in business. Is private investment in business a good or bad thing?
Me? Inward investment into Hawke's Bay? Well,
I think it's a value judgment. Having my brief time in Hawke's Bay is the region has a real issue with attracting inwards investment. Not enough of it. A vibrant, prosperous economy brings inwards investment in, and we've got a real capitalisation issue here, in my view.
Any other questions in relation to the paper? Councillor Rem as well.
Thank you. Regarding the 190,000 of consultancy work,
Here we go.
how much of that is costs relating to the Mana Whenua Working Party, and what was that for, please?
Heath, can you drop down at that level?
Yeah. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was for, but I can tell you the cost was for the month was less than $5,000.
And is that for payments to people, or?
Yes, it is. It's a payment to. I can't exactly remember who the invoice is for, but it was from one invoice for about $4,500.
Sorry, it was difficult to hear the question down here. I wonder if
Mana Whenua Working Party on page 41, Councillor at the top, the 190,000 cost covering there. Any other questions around the finances? Now we're on to finance. Councillor Rem as well.
Yeah, just in relation to earlier page 37. Can you please explain, Andrew, intergenerational equity and what you mean by that term, please?
Yep, sure. I'll just find a statement on it. It's in the narrative.
It's stuck here about the middle. Yeah.
Yeah. Afraid my eyesight for reading small prints. Right, great. So what we're considering, but it ultimately would have to come through any concession deed and framework around investment, but consistent with the feasibility stage, where the proposition was to establish a structure, an investment structure that was a build, own, operate, transfer mechanism. Then there's a view, and I think I personally support this view that for community investment, if you like, which is possibly farmers investing in the infrastructure itself at day one or at financial close, and or any potential redress around settlement issues for iwi, then that the value of that investment should transition past the boot or the transfer. So what's being suggested is the transfer back to the public sector at the end of the concession period at nil cost, but some rights, whether community based, it would be legitimate to staple those to the transfer and carry those on. That's what that refers to. Whereas that's not proposed for, I guess what you'd say is institutional equity from the private sector. Would be valued in some form at the end of concession period, but it's really reflecting the grounding of the community actually, and I think that's what that means. Yep.
And also, it's just explaining briefly, if you wouldn't mind, just above that on the uptake, and you mentioned earlier about irrigated finishing is very popular at the moment.
Sorry.
Irrigated finishing.
Oh yeah.
Can you? Yep. My question is, if I understand it correctly, that relates to a certain time period of a year. It's not like for a whole year.
No, but no irrigation is.
So, if I was a landowner, what would I do with my land the rest of the time when I wasn't using it for that specific purpose?
I'll give you. You'd still, if you're say you're sheep and beef, and you're looking to either finish or, and there's others around the room looking at those with farming backgrounds who could probably help me out. But what you would do is if you're looking at a sheep or beef finishing deal, you're looking to fatten prime stock at a particular point in the year that then interfaces in terms of the timing into when the prices are best. It could be winter, it could be spring, it could be summer. But the point is that really, if I to give you a category, I'll give you 3 types of land use in terms of irrigation water demand. In broad terms, just to keep it conceptual here, is that the McFarlane work looked at a part dryland, part irrigated finishing option, which in effect, the argument that McFarlane came up with, which is actually is showing out in the EOIs that Duncan's working on, is that a part irrigated option for a farmer in that enterprise means that they look after their entire farm and land base in a much better way, because they rest their pastures at certain points in the dryland scenario, and it's a cheaper conversion process than is the case for dairy. Uses quite a bit less water, and that's reflected because we've got a volumetric charge on the water price, so it's you effectively pay per cubic metre of water in the model. Then the less water you use, the less you pay for the water. So that favours efficient uses of water in an irrigating sense. There's another variation on the theme with arable. So arable, for example, you may only want to irrigate once in the year, but if you're a really smart operator, you'll want to grow 2 crops that happen this summer, for example. One quite well-known case, 37 hectares irrigated, had double cropped. So he grew beans, I think, first, or peas first. Can't remember what. He sold the peas first. Sold the peas straw for fodder. Sold the peas. Yeah, thank God for that. Grew beans. Sold the straw from the beans, and is now fattening lambs. And so, therefore, depending on how you want to integrate your operation, what irrigation does is it gives you options that you don't have if you don't have it. And the real value premium around the water access is the optionality it gives you. Now, I'll just give you the dairy case. Dairy is different again, generally speaking, unless it's a dairy support or an integrated dairy support dairy deal. But if you're growing pasture for dairy, you generally speaking, got to irrigate for 5-6 months, which is one of the reasons why it's such a big consumer of water, comparatively speaking. So what I'm really saying is that I think if you price water correctly, then it drives a whole lot of really smart thinking about what's the best land use and how do I broaden my options, increase resilience. In that particular case that Fenton's aware of, I won't talk to financials, but they were exceptionally good.
Where is that particular?
Central Hawke's Bay.
Mr. Chairman, I think Mr. Newman summed that up very well, because once you introduce irrigation, you widen the options. I'll just give 2 scenarios that I've witnessed involving both livestock and arable, and one is what brown rig agriculture do very well, and they grow an arable crop, which is either mainly squash or maize, which is quite a long rotation crop, and they kick-start it off in the spring, and then as the crops ripen over the summer, there's virtually little or no irrigation, and then when they've harvested the crop, they put in a short rotation ryegrass or fattening crop, and then they're finishing livestock over the late winter, early spring, which is the off-season, and meets the continuity of chilled exports at the moment. And the other scenario we witnessed at a field day at Nestor Gray's, where he grew 2 short rotation crops, peas and beetroot. Then he did the same thing with winter fattening. And there's no infrastructure to establish on that sort of thing, unlike a dairy farm where you're really committed. You make a huge investment of your infrastructure, and then you've got that irrigation right across the summer. I actually think that if the dam happens, the land use that will develop there will be along the lines of what we see on the Hiratonga Plains.